All right, everybody. Dan Fitzpatrick here at stockmarketmentor.com, and I want to look at Hut 8. I could say Hut 8 times, but we'll just say it's Hut 8. Now, a lot of these Bitcoin miners have been rocking. We put a few of them, well, I did anyway, a few of them on our active trade list the other day. And it's worked out really, really well, like really well. We've got Iron, and that's Studley. We've got this one also working really well, and then of course we have Hut and we have Riot. So this is what I wanted to show you though on this one. By the way, I think all of these are still buyable. Actually, they're pretty. I would say volatile, but volatile indicates up and down. These they're just like going up, so you better manage your risk well. But here's the thing. It'd be easy to look at this level here, extend it out and say, okay, well, this is massive resistance here. Look how many times this struggled to get through here. So this is the obvious place for this to pause. I would say that, in fact, I will say, it's not the obvious place for it to pause, but it is something that you want to keep in mind. And this is why I say that. Okay, between when this finally failed here and it never revisited 30 again and where it is right now, okay, that's almost 9 months have gone by. Look at all the volume, all here. Now, we had some light volume here during the sideways consolidation, but as the stock fell, this was high volume here. Low volume here, more consolidation. Now we really see the volume picking up here. When is it picking up? When the stock's running higher. Okay, so this kind of confirms the oomph behind the move. Higher volume when a stock is running up tells you that there's some real money behind this, all right? And then we get this big move here. Massive day, more than twice average volume on this move. And this never quite, well, I guess it did retrace, but only barely. Like, in other words, this thing came back to where it had broken out and then bounced off the 50 again. So, and then we've got what? How many green skyscrapers do we have here? We got all these high volume green bars that tell us that institutions are buying this stock. They're not going to buy it at 30 to sell it at 30.76. They've been buying it all the way up, which is why it's been going all the way up. We got high volume here. This is not the best entry right now. I feel pretty good about ours, but this is buyable here. The way I would suggest doing this is it's a weekly chart, but the way I'd suggest doing this, if you're saying, okay, I want to participate here, but I kind of have a hard time buying it, you probably get a better entry. The way this is right now, let's see. Yeah, we're after the close here, but I could see this pulling back at some point closer to the 8-day EMA, something like that. But the way you take a position in something like this without fear of losing a lot of money is just not to put a lot of money to work. You put a little bit of money to work, you give the position a little more room, and then if it starts paying off, then you can start adding to your position because you're already involved. If it's not paying off, you either just hold what you have, do not average down, or just sell it, one of the two. But that's a way that you can get into a stock that's not giving you the perfect entry. But as for this over here being viable resistance, frankly, the further back in time the price action is, the less relevant it is to current conditions, simply because of all the emotion wrung out of this. People that are unhappy they bought it here. Somewhere between here and here, they've already sold. So what we're really looking at is this. This is the trend that we're looking at. I don't care about that longer term trend, but this is the trend that we're looking at. I don't know what that is. And we can just kind of draw support and resistance, something like that right along here. It's not a perfect line. I got a ton of lines in here. It's like I don't know, dropped a box of toothpicks. But anyway, so that's all I have to say here. I think this stock's going. Not a great entry right here, but I'll just put it this way. You do want to be long this stock. You want to be long Riot. You definitely want to be long Riot. You want to be long, again, Hut. You want to be long Cipher, as I call it. Cipher Mining, you want to be long that. And you want to be long iron. Okay. Any questions? I didn't think so. Members, look at the strategy session. I actually did it live, but look at the strategy session. I've updated some stops on our positions, and we've got some great trades going. If you're not a member of Stock Market Mentor, if you think that it's maybe time for you to be making money in the market, maybe time for you to check that out. Dude, it's $7 for 14 days. Tell me, you've got $7. If you quit smoking already, think about this way. The money that you would be spending on a pack of smokes, you can spend 14 days with me. By the way, I don't know if smokes, are they more than 14 or I don't even know. Anyway, that's all I got. I will see you all on the backside.